For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Capital Calculus. This is the show that examines policies and developments through the intersection of politics and economics to share a fresh perspective with you every week, especially in trying to unpack the underlying strategic imperatives. I'm your host, Anil Padmanabhan. Last week, Skyroot Aerospace created history when it successfully launched its rocket from Sriharikota. It was the first time that a private sector had manufactured and launched a rocket since the rules were liberalized in 2020. In fact, many view this as the dawn of a new space era for India. Let us watch the event.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Event number 96 completed.
And we have a successful liftoff of Vikram-S rocket. I think I should be able to show you the jubilant environment here at the Mission Control Center, where the entire team is celebrating the launch and the spin stabilized rocket. The views from the launcher camera.
The jubilation was understandable. Skyroot Aerospace had just created history. To understand the implications of this launch and more, we spoke to General Anil Bhatt. He is the Director General of Indian Space Association. As the head of this body, he is in a vantage position to view and explain to us the new playbook that the Indian space sector has adopted. Welcome, General Bhatt.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to talk to Stat News Global.
Thank you, General. Last week, in fact, last Friday, the Skyroot Aerospace launched their rocket very successfully at Sriharikota. And it's the first private launch of a rocket since the government liberalized the rules in 2020. So your first thoughts?
It's a great moment for Indian private space. The launch by Skyroot proves that our private sector is now space worthy. And this is one of the first steps for many such successes which will come into the private sector now. Because our private sector is all ready and prepared to move forward and be part of the Indian space enterprise.
So, General, taking up from what you just left off, so can we characterize this as the new dawn, or rather a new era for the Indian space ambitions?
Oh, definitely. What our government and our Prime Minister had announced on June 2020 to open up space to private players, that is now becoming a reality. And those opportunities in space, especially in the commercial domain, which are many, this is the first step for it to grow much more in India.
So, General, can you take us back to that moment in 2020 and very briefly, explain to us the new playbook that government adopted through Isro, the major building blocks, as it were?
In June 2020, it was a historic decision when it was announced that now space has been opened to the private sector. This was followed by a draft new space SATCOM policy, which was also issued in October. And in the same time, it was announced that in space, a new organization would be made to promote, regulate, authorize space in India. And thereafter, in December, on the advice of the Prime Minister, our organization, that is the Indian Space Association, was also made primarily to be a bridge between all our industry members and the government, and to create an ecosystem in India for space. And ISPA itself, which was just a 5-member organization in December 2020, has now grown to nearly 50 members.
So interesting. General, if you can explain the primary earlier, before 2020, ISRO kind of ran both the commercial as well as their own research operations. Post these changes, my sense is that InSpace now handles all the decisions on regulation, commercial operations, etc. And your organization is a kind of interface. And then you have NSIL, right? The New Space India Limited.
So I've just explained it. With the new structures which came up after privatization was decided was one. What did it intend to do? That ISRO, which had a very wide spectrum and canvas, they were looking into going to the moon, going to Mars, as well as also looking into commercial activities, looking into allocation of transponder spectrum authorization also was all being done by ISRO. It was felt that some of the lower end or some of the activities which were not of exploratory science research could be given on to the private sector. And I would like to add here that in the last 60 years, ISRO has been the single primary player in the space domain. But notwithstanding that, they have developed private players in India, Larsen and Toubro, HAL, Walchand Industries, Godrej, have all been suppliers of components, sub-assemblies to ISRO. ISRO was the integrator. And now, after this policy has come, as you would be aware, one of the decisions taken is that the next 5 PSLVs will be made by a consortium of HAL and L&T. And many such initiatives to allow private players to be independently be able to take on space activities, that is what the bill has done. And in space, which was an organization created, is for promotion, for regulation, for authorization of all activities of private players. NSIL is a third organization which has newly come, which is called the New Space India Limited. This is the public sector company of ISRO. All products of ISRO which will be now commercially utilized, like the launch vehicles, satellites to be launched from there, or even transfer of technology of ISRO would be done through NSIL, which is a public sector undertaking.
So that's they've unbundled it very well. So the commercial arm, the regulatory arm, and now your organization. You mentioned the Indian Space Association's membership is now expanded to 50. So who are these members? Are they like private companies? Is it like does it operate like a trade body? What exactly does ISPA do?
We are an association of all players in India who are there in the space domain. Our founder members, like I said, is OneWeb of Bharti Airtel. It is Walchand Industries. It is Larsen and Toubro. It is Map My India, which is a indigenous company making the best maps in India and even competing with Google. Then we have Alpha Design Technologies, which has been there in the domain of making components of satellites earlier and aspire to make satellites in the future. Other than this, we have even members who are from outside and who are operating in India, like Intelsat, Hughes, and many others. And the whole host of startups which are in upstream, downstream, and in an application. In fact, anyone who is there in the space domain in India, any private player, is our member.
So, General, all the startups are members, and any count, or some of them have not yet become a member?
I would. There are 104 startups, and we have about 25 to 27 who are members. These are the ones who have reached certain levels. Of course, we are open to anyone joining us, as and when they are developing into some shape, they are coming and joining us. We have been campaigning, and we would aspire that all of them, all startups, are our members, and we can help them. Firstly, to collaborate with each other, and also to help them with the government, with other industry, and with ISRO.
So, General, this Indian Space Association then acts like the voice of these private sector players and engages government, regulator, NSIL, right?
Yes. So, what are the aims we have taken out for us? First and most importantly, be a single voice for the entire space industry. We are into policy advocacy, all policies, all new rules which are being made. We are discussing it very intimately with the Department of Space, Department of Telecommunication, and with InSpace and ISRO. As well as also we are looking at international cooperation. We are looking at measures for ease of doing business, and in the long run for capacity development through academia and IITs and other training establishments. We also provide an interface with defense, because defense is one of the major users of space world over and in India.
So, General, this as Director General, you're in a perfect vantage position to walk us through the kind of new playbook that is unraveling before us. So, but I want to go back to the Skyroot launch because it was pulled off in less than 2 years since the rules were liberalized. So, how exactly did they pull this off so swiftly, so effectively, and so successfully?
First and the most important reason is the excellent team they have. They have two young founder members, Pawan and Dhaka, who are from IIT, and in fact, Pawan is an ex-ISRO scientist. Other than that, in their back end, in their support, in fact, one of the lead cryogenic engineers, scientists in India, is also part of their team. He advises them on manufacturing of engines. They have a strong, that has been one very positive effect, that even ex-ISRO scientists have been permitted to work with these startups and support them to create an opportunity and ecosystem. And other than that, what Skyroot has been able to get is other small vendors, other places where they could carry out their tests. Even the support from ISRO has been overwhelming. It has been great for them to try the equipment, and even till their launch, the support from ISRO, handholding from ISRO, has been of a very high order. And most important, I would say, is the spirit, the enterprise, and the drive these young team has. And many of these such startups we do have in India.
So, General, why I asked you about the quick turnaround is I was curious whether its ability to build and launch a rocket successfully in 2 years of obviously a smaller rocket size, does it kind of add to the overall strategic capability of India in space?
Oh, yes. Very recently, in the last 6 months, we have been interacting as industry body very intimately with the Ministry of Defense. And DSA, that is the Defense Space Agency, the Ministry of Defense itself, the three services, and all industry members, we sat down and we have created 75 defense challenges, which basically means what are the aspirations of the defense sector from private sector. That includes like things like launch on demand, a quick launch when it is required operationally. It also looks at sensors, it looks at communication and multiple domains. There are 75 of them. And the fact that the Ministry of Defense, after consultations with ISRO and DRDO, has given these challenges to the private players is the faith they have that they will be able to meet these challenges. And this would definitely spur growth for the private industry and also provide defense and opportunity than other than ISRO and DRDO for meeting their aspirations.
Interesting, General. This launch on demand is it also besides being a crack team, also consequence of the kind of technology they adopted? I believe they use carbon fiber and 3D printing in creating this rocket. So does that
So
also contribute shorter time supply chain?
definitely, what the claims the Skyroot team has is that after they have this was a trial, and thereafter they are going to launch Vikram 1, Vikram 2, and Vikram 3. What they aspire to do is ultimately that they will be able to assemble and prepare a rocket to be launched in 72 hours. And why is it possible? Because quite a bit of printing is being done by 3D printing. Presently, their fuel injectors in their three cryogenic engines which they used were made by 3D printing. Also, the body of the rocket has been made by composite carbon fiber. And this carbon fiber, unlike a metallic body which was previously made, this is a composite carbon fiber which is stronger and lighter. And similarly, many other new technologies are being used. In fact, another company which is going to launch very soon, you mentioned Agricool, is having a complete 3D cryogenic engine. So these are the new transformations where engines will be assembled much faster because they will be 3D printed.
And presumably they'll have less flaws too because they are 3D printed.
Yes, definitely that there'll be more precision in the engineering part of it.
Going back to Skyroot, their class of rockets, or maybe even Agnicool's class of rockets, what are the use cases? I mean, if you can walk us through that, what are the use cases
Now,
of these kind
what
of?
they are looking at is one is like yeah, one as you had said and spoken is the launch on demand itself. But primarily, what they are looking at is they're looking at 250 kgs to approximately 800 kgs in the low Earth orbit and the solar synchronous orbit. In both these orbits, at a height of 500 kilometers and around, that is what they are looking at presently, the capabilities which they're developing. And this is for primarily for, as I would say, low Earth orbit capabilities, for low Earth orbit launching of satellites. And what is attractive is because they carry low payloads, small satellites or small players. Because today in India or maybe in the world over, large satellites carry a very large payload, and hence there's a queuing when many small satellites have to be launched. Now, these players who have smaller satellites, and as it is, the satellites are getting miniaturized, they do not have to wait for a long time before the next launch takes place. For any payload which is of
So,
250.
so general hypothetically, that means like the OneWeb launch that happened, which was of course a very complex 36
Yeah.
satellites being put in space. But theoretically, this is a task which these new generation of rockets, which Skyroot, etc., launching can do.
Yes, of course, that payload is a little too large for them because the 36 satellites was a very large payload, and that is why it had to be launched from our biggest uh, launch vehicle, that is the GSLV. But for smaller payloads, for small satellites, a smaller payload and a smaller number, these rockets would be more effective and useful. And they are more cost effective because 1 to 2 satellites to be launched immediately can be done by that. In fact,
General, you mentioned.
SSLV in India would be in the same category.
General, you mentioned how these rockets can be used to place satellites in a low Earth orbit. Can you just explain to our viewers what exactly is low Earth orbit and why is it become so significant now?
Low Earth orbit primarily is described between 200 kilometers to 2000 kilometers, while the highest orbit is the geosynchronous orbit, which is 36,000, which is 21,000 miles, about 36,000 kilometers. So that is the difference. So the orbit which is the closest to Earth, between 200 and 2000 kilometers, is called the low Earth orbit. Why has it become attractive? It has become attractive because for communication, one of the biggest problem was latency when it was from the geo orbit because the distance traveled by signals used to be much large. Now the new constellations which are being made by Starlink, by OneWeb, and Kuiper in the future would be between 300 to 400 to 500, where the problem of latency would not be there. Similarly, for remote sensing, which could be done by one geo satellite, but it is at a very large distance, and hence the accuracy or the precision of what is got from remote sensing would be lesser. Now with low Earth orbit, and like Pixel would be launching 36 satellites in that, they would be able to have a hyperspectral uh, remote sensing cameras to see the whole Earth just with 36 satellites. So it is basically coming closer to the Earth.
So, General, earlier you in the conversation you mentioned about how Hindustan Aeronautics Limited and L&T, their combined or consortium, won a contract which is to launch or to rather create PSLVs, these polar satellite launch vehicles. Now, what does that tell you about the capability of Indian private sector, which prior to 2020 were there, but they were like vendors to ISRO, not partners. So now they are evolving into a partnership role.
So this is a very major change, and it is the faith which the system now has on our private players. HAL and L&T and other companies also had been providing components of the launch vehicle to ISRO, and ISRO was the lead integrator. This is a time a leap of faith has been taken with confidence because of capabilities, and this 860 crore project, they would be making the first 5 PSLVs, which they will be making for ISRO and NSIL and would be launched by them. But the next step would be that they would also be owning these PSLVs and would be commercially using them. That is after the first 5 months.
So, General, you have an inside view of things. So, you have walked us through the institutional framework, how ISRO's commercial operations were unpacked and vested, the regulatory powers were separated, etc. But how does, you are unbundling an organization which has its own unique DNA, which has evolved so successfully, is a world-class player. So how does this recalibration work on the ground, particularly personnel? How did you see it going down in the last 2 years, managing this calibration very carefully?
Very true. Change management is one of the most challenging things. And this is being very well led by Chairman ISRO presently. And very rightly, I would quote him here when he says that from an ISRO-led space environment in India, it has now become a space enterprise which has the private players, the startups, the academia, and ISRO. And I have no doubts in my mind that if this entire space enterprise, this new space ecosystem has to grow in India, ISRO's mentorship, their role of leadership will continue. The facilities which ISRO provides, the higher scientific technology and the legacy they have of 60 years would be required by private players and the nation for space ecosystem in India to grow.
But it's a real tribute to ISRO that they have, seeded their space so generously and continue to operate like a benefactor guide. So, in fact, this launch is a classic PPP enterprise, and it worked very well.
The kind of interest which was there, the support which was there, the hand-holding which has been done for this launch is an indicator of many positives for the private sector and for the growth of our space industry.
So, General, that brings me to my final question that you did allude to it earlier in the conversation about how the Defense Department is also very closely looking at these operations being sourced out to the private sector. And this is a very strategic area because most of space technologies of dual use. So, do you envisage that, from where you said, that eventually Indian private sector will also partner in defense enterprise, like say in the US, with obviously non-disclosure agreements, etc., in place? But do you envisage that future?
Definitely, the beginning has been made by the defense space challenges, which were released by our Prime Minister during the Defense Expo in Ahmedabad. The fact that the Ministry of Defense, the three services, have laid down these challenges, given these new expectations to the private sector, means that they are looking at the private sector as a partner in the space domain. Of course, all sensitivities of security will be taken care of. And in all these challenges, one thing is very important and clear, that it is not talking of any kinetic or non-kinetic weapons. It is talking of all dual use technologies, be it in communication, be it in navigation, be it in remote sensing, which is called ISR in the Army, and also for marine domain awareness, and also for space domain awareness, which are two new emerging and important sectors.
Interesting. General, actually, it's very critical because the next battle will not be fought with the conventional armies. It'll probably be fought in space. There'll be what they call space wars, and the kind we saw in Star Trek and what Isaac Asimov and all mentioned. So it's a very interesting future that we are looking at, where the Indian private sector is going to be a very key partner, right?
So there are two parts of space being used by the defense forces. One is to enhance their capability presently to fight in the three domains of land, air, and sea. That is the more important and critical part which the private players will participate in. The second one, which you are talking of, space wars or the space, that would take a little more time. That would require much more capability, and I'm sure that would be more of led by the government than by private players. But yes, they would have definitely a role in technologies for that.
So finally, actually, sorry, I wanted to got a follow-up question from my earlier question to you. So there is a convergence happening between the strategic capability and the commercial benefits of that to the private sector. It's a kind of win-win situation, which, but the subtext of all of this is the very strong trust quotient that the government is establishing with the private sector, right?
Yeah. And let me assure you, we have an equal number of patriots in uniform and outside uniform. And I'm very sure that the issues of security will be well looked after. And of course, firewalls wherever required for this will be ensured by the government. But yes, the private players in India are ready to support the nation's effort, all including in the strategic sector.
Thank you very much, General. Thank you. You have very patiently walked us through and very simple terms explained a lot of things to us. Thank you again.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure to talk to you, and it is always an excellent interaction for all of us. And my best wishes from ISPA and all our private players. And we are looking at a very attractive future ahead.
It is clear then that India is evolving new contours for its commercial space program, the one in which the Indian private sector is a key stakeholder. At the same time, care is being taken to preserve and nurture the prowess of Isro. Luckily for India, the stars seem to be aligned. At the moment, Russia and China are global pariahs. That means fewer competitors for the global space market, which many projected to be 1 trillion in the future. Clearly, this is a moment for India to seize. Thank you for watching. Do remember to subscribe to Strat News Global on YouTube. Hit the bell icon so that you don't miss any updates. And please do share your insights and comments with us. I'm available on Twitter at Capital Calculus. I'll be back next week with another episode. Till then, stay safe.